All right, welcome to another little collaboration between myself and Matt O'Leary. Very excited to have you back on here. We have decided to do kind of a retrospective of Hemispheres. So,
There we go.
really excited to talk about it. So, Matt, why don't you tell us a little bit about your own experience with this album?
So Rush in general, I grew up listening to the Greatest Hits CD. That's what my dad had, and they're a band that they have so many amazing hits that you could pretty much survive off of that.
It's
You
true,
know,
yeah.
and they never get old. To me, they're just absolute classics. I mean, there's just no beating some of
Yeah.
those songs that to me are just locked in my brain as just core to my music taste.
Yeah.
So I started that way, and then I went back in college and started listening to full albums.
Yeah.
And I know Hemispheres to be one of the most technical. It's one where they really took the time in the studio um, and experimenting with different techniques to get the most proggy, the most I think of it as just intelligent Rush sound.
Yeah, for sure.
There's a lot going on. It's very technical. I think it really showcases them at their best instrumentally.
Yeah.
I didn't listen to them in a specific order, but Hemispheres was one of the first ones I checked out just because of its esteem, and it's definitely up there. I haven't really formally ranked them, but
Yeah.
it's up there. So
Yeah, and my experience with them is pretty much the exact same as yours. Growing up as well, my dad had a few of their albums on vinyl. Like I think he had Fly By Night and Caress of Steel, and then a few of the best of. So it was always there, but I never really listened to a full length album. And it wasn't until I want to say my grade when I was in grade 11, I picked up five albums for my birthday, and Hemispheres was just one of them because it was a re-release with just a black cover with just like the Hemispheres logo with Resh on it.
oh, so you didn't even get that
I didn't even get that iconic cover.
yeah.
No, so whenever I think of Hemispheres, I always picture this black case with the red Rush and then Hemispheres very small below it.
That's a shame. I feel like it's
Yeah,
a great
yeah.
it's a great cover.
Oh, it's beautiful. I think it was the same artist that does a lot of Pink Floyd stuff and Led Zeppelin stuff.
Graphic and minimal, using icons,
Yeah,
that are, once you understand the story of the album, just
yeah.
perfect.
So I picked it up, and it turned out to be my favorite of all the five albums that I picked up, and just fell in love with the band from there. And then slowly, as I worked my way through their discography, I'm still not quite done, but it might just be because it's the first one. It might also just be because it might be their best, but it's definitely been one of my favorite albums from them.
Yeah. Listening to it, I'm surprised that it didn't come out earlier.
Yeah, considering what they were doing.
It sounds like a 74, 75, maybe that range prog. So in that sense, I was surprised it was 78. Just thinking
Yeah,
this doesn't sound like ahead of its time. It doesn't really predict the 80s and what was to come
yeah,
there. And it seems like there was kind of a dramatic shift for them, um, with Permanent Waves somewhat, um, but into
yeah,
that more 80s production and sound. This was kind of one of
yeah.
those last just solid acoustic sounding drums, um, and bass tones that they had.
Yeah, I feel like this was the real last album before Getty decided to fully embrace that synthesizer. Like he was flirting with it, but he hadn't quite switched his status on Facebook from, single and ready to mingle to full blown relationship.
And once he went for it, man, he did not turn
He
back. That
didn't even
guy,
look back.
that guy
No.
loved it. Yeah,
All right, well, let's dive into this album and actually start talking about the music that's found within it.
yeah,
And it really starts off at an end because this is the end of the big three album arc that started off with 2112s, and had a little bit of a feature on Farewell to Kings.
Yeah, the last track.
And when I first was like exposed to this album, I didn't realize that's what it was. I just thought it was a overly long track, and at the time I loved, long tracks. Um, but having it be this finale of a 3 album stint, it provides a lot more context and a lot more grounding for the overall story that's being presented.
I think of it as its own
Oh, okay.
thing. I mean, I see how it's connected to those, but I think of 2112 as a much less clearly defined um, vision. Musically, I think it's a little more all over the place.
Yep.
I really love that album for like its just rawness and its concept. I like the concept a lot, but I think that Hemispheres is the most fully fledged out lyrical piece of theirs.
Yeah, I like that thought of like they brought out some ideas on 2112 and then they perfected it here on Hemispheres.
Yeah, there's something more mature about the stories and the way they're presented.
What I really like about Hemispheres that kind of puts it above 2112 is how they handle the transitions between pieces.
Mm.
Within 2112, it does feel like it's a number of individual tracks that they just forgot to cut.
Yep, you get the big epic, and then you get like a bunch of just like fun tunes.
Exactly, kind of like interludes. You're having fun.
Yeah, whereas this one, it all streams together with like 4 separate, pretty massive thematic.
Yeah, and each one relates to each other, not just lyrically, but musically as well. Like there are themes that Alex will put down on the guitars that Giddy will pick up in the bass line later on in the album, or at least later on in the song. So it's not like they just kind of put something down and then forget about it and move on to the next piece. They actually string the concepts and themes throughout that song.
Yeah, and I guess I haven't noticed quite as much the musical themes, like repeating, and maybe that'll just take more time, but it seems like they'd be pretty subtle. I will say that on Farewell to Kings, I think from that one to this one, Getty's voice went from really raw and even like kind of crazed. Yeah. Like some of those screams, I don't know if you've listened to it recently, but
I haven't listened to it recently.
the first part of Cygnus just like, yeah! So he has a lot of those. And on this one, it's just like a little more resonant, a little less shrieky and
Yeah, there's a little bit more of a refinement.
Yeah. So right when it comes in on the song, I think it's just like, like it just takes control. I love his voice on this whole album.
Mm-hmm.
Or there's a section of it in it that's sort of, to me, a precursor to YYZ. In a sense. It sounds like that really mathematical
right.
That's right, yeah. Prog stuff.
That's right, yeah.
What do you think just about the music on this track?
Yeah, the music overall is just stunning.
Yeah.
Near the last quarter, there's a little bit of a reprisal. Almost like it's on like a phone or something. Like themes come in and move and like disappear that happened prior in the track, as well as on Farewell to Kings and 2112. And the only other time that I've heard that was on Atom Heart Mother from Pink Floyd.
So
hearing that type of a technique be used again, as their kind of a launch into the last real section of the song, really blew me away in terms of like innovation and seeing what music could do and not letting, I guess, preconceived notions of what music could do kind of stop them.
Is that in the like guitar and vocal sort of uplifting end section, or is it before that?
It's just before that. In that sense, it's almost like them looking into this like nebulous of creativity and like seeing what's come in the past and then almost glancing what's coming into the future all at the same time. And then that's where, this character of Cygnus kind of like comes into his own.
Yeah, because he's the bringer of balance.
That's right. And so that's where like he's spoken with the oracles or whatever, and now he's come down from the hill to spread the good news, right?
I mean, the theme is such a core human
struggle
between mind and heart, between reason and love. And you get that depicted on the cover with the brain. And I think it's so fascinating um, that this is that binary, that distinction, and that relationship is something that's built into our biology.
Yeah,
Evolutionarily, it is our brain is bifurcated. We have hemispheres.
that yeah,
There's a line that I just love that, and I know Neil Peart wrote these lyrics. I think probably right.
yeah. It most likely was Neil Peart.
He has just lines in here. There's one that he talks about every soul is a battlefield, and I know he draws a lot of inspiration from Tolkien and Lord of the Rings. That's been like in their songs before this album, and just the idea that the struggle of humanity is like within each individual, and that every single soul there's this battle and this struggle is just a really potent thing.
And I love how, like, as you were saying before, we've got that like ingrained within us, within our hemispheres, within the brain, um, and how each hemisphere has like the logical thinking side and then the more of the artistic side. And throughout the entire stretch of this, you had that totalitarian regime where they're like banning music, you can't even touch a guitar, and then you can see kind of not necessarily the validity, but like how they got there, how the reasoning got to that point. And then you have this Cygnus character coming in and bringing the balance of like bringing back that expression, that need to emote, and bringing that balance between the two hemispheres of not only the brain but of also the spirit. And I thought bringing that all together within this music was just like it was so perfectly presented.
Yeah, so one of the things I feel like they could have done, where maybe this is kind of a critique, is the music between the sections where the god of wisdom is speaking, God, Apollo, and then the god of love, Dionysus. I can. Dionysus.
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 It's okay. I can't pronounce anything either.
I don't know. When because they both kind of give their introduction to the world that they see as the best. Apollo being like this ordered universe, and Dionysus having more freedom and liberty and just like free roaming chaos, essentially. And I don't feel like the music between those two sections is entirely different. I don't feel like Getty is really playing a different character. His vocals are sort of similar between the two verses. And yeah, I just feel like they could have done more with maybe making like the second one of love a little more romantic or softer or something sounding.
Yeah, and when I first kind of figured out, that these were two different characters, at first I thought this was showing how there was love and beauty in like wisdom and the analysis of things, and also how the analysis of things and wisdom is, on your pathway to love and truth and, all good things. But on the same card, though, when I was listening to this the first couple of times without looking through the liner notes, I did kind of think that the Dionysus stuff came a lot later, because I thought, again, that Apollo and Dionysus, it was all the same part, because there wasn't that clear distinction between the two.
Yeah, like you didn't hear that naturally in the music. It took you reading the lyrics to actually find.
Exactly.
Yeah, and at the same time, like the melody and the chords and everything about the music in those two sections, or just any, like the verses, it's all great. It's not like, this is something that I feel like if they do it, they're geniuses. If they make that distinction, and if they don't do it, it's like I criticize them. So there's no real middle ground for them. But I do think it's like the whole song is like a riveting thing, and the theme as far as presenting the because they have their little introduction to their ideas of the world or their vision of the world, and then they tell you how the people are living in that under that ideology, and you see the downside, you see the downfall of both those things. The first one being they're building all these fine things, but they run out of, I think he says, one day the streets fell silent, they knew not what was wrong. One day the urge to build these fine things seemed not to be so strong. So they basically like nihilism set in and they lost the reason to
Yeah.
to do it. And then on the other side, they're living in a forest and they're like singing songs and playing music and just so happy and free. But then
Yeah.
the winter comes and they're not ready for it and they starve and the wolves come and eat them. And so you see like the downside of both extremes and
Yeah.
the necessity for this character to come in and bring the correct balance.
Yeah, it's very profound in like summarizing so many different parables and stories from like our past within our cultures, in such a succinct way. Like I keep having to remind myself that even though this is a long song, at being 20 minutes, it's able to present such profound ideas so clearly.
So clearly. Yeah, like there's no like screwing around. It's just like they get on with it, but it's still poetic. It's not like it's just like a list of events.
Yeah, like this song itself is its own little balance of being very analytical and like textual, while also presenting it in such a beautiful and artistic way.
Yeah, yeah, and that's it. I think of the band Rush as that way. They're like a perfect representation of the balance because they are really intellectual and really precise and measured. And I feel like Neil Peart's lyrics a lot of times are very like cold and unfeeling. But at the same time, they're just like filled with expression. And one of the things just about Rush in general that I think is so powerful is that there's not a hint of contrived, sort of fake or um, presentation there. I feel like it just feels genuinely so sincere.
Yeah.
Everything they do, in the nerdiest moments of them, it just feels like so them.
Yeah, it's unabashedly sometimes. uh, so shall we transition then into circumstances? I think we've talked enough about Hemispheres and how brilliant it was. Um, I think this was really the only quote unquote single from this album was Circumstances.
Yeah, and it's poppier, but it's a nice break from the one before. It's just this journey, not repetitive. All of a sudden, we get these like choruses that are catchy and
At least the transition is not completely jarring because there is still quite a bit of philosophy within it.
yeah,
Like the main course that they say over and over again is, the more things change, the more they stay the same.
yeah. And then he says it in French, and then he says,
Yeah, so my Canadian heart kind of goes out because I'm like, hey, there's the second language. There it is. Yeah, I feel like it's a good kind of a transition piece, as like a nice little come down from the big epic that had preceded it, before we go into kind of the other tracks. I always felt like this was kind of the lower point on the album because I love the trees and I love the last song, but Circumstances, I'm like, I can kind of take it or leave it.
it's a little bit of a palate cleanser, but to me, it does have, like you said, the philosophy still has like a lot of substance there. It doesn't feel as much like on 2112, some of the tracks on that, which to me are a little bit like less related to the whole. This one still feels like it's like an essential piece to me. And I think that there are still some musically, there are crazy changes throughout the song. I love the chorus riff a lot, and I have no idea what they're doing there with time. It's like, I can't count it. And the tones like are just signature classic Geddy Lee and like Alex Lifeson.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you mentioned the trees.
Yeah, let's just dive into the trees because I love the trees.
Oh man.
I love everything about this. Like, I love the philosophy that's brought through with it, like the allegory of it all. I love the music because I love how it starts off very slow with just the acoustic guitar with Alex, and Geddy is very, like, he sounds very humbled, like almost like a,
This serene classical guitar.
yeah, and he comes in almost like a storyteller. It's a classic storyteller trope of setting the environment first by saying, there's unrest in the forest, there's trouble with the trees, and just kind of opening that stage. And then once we get into the actual song, it blasts.
And it's like musically medieval with like the guitar and that bass line that's so like melodious and like doo doo doo. It kind of sounds like a flute line, like a medieval flute line or something. And yeah, and he like sets the stage. It's just like the classic like geekiest Rush song.
It is.
To me, it's absolutely stapled in my mind. Like this was a song I was like a childhood.
Yeah, this brings back so much nostalgia for me. It's just I can't help but love this, and like this was also when they started to really experiment as well within a shorter piece. Because I don't know if it's a drum machine or if it is legit Pert that's playing on like these wooden mallets.
I know he does it live.
I'm sure they probably did it in the studio as well, but it almost sounds a little synthesized. But again, that just might be the mastery of Pert.
But that little section with the synth and like doo 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 is just like just you can't touch it. It's classic.
It's just perfect.
And the wood with the trees and just the the allegory I didn't really understand when I was a kid, but then I grew up and saw it for what it is, which is really just like the classic telling of like oppressed versus oppressor.
Yeah.
That sort of narrative.
Yeah, the more I think about it, the more I get out of it as well, which is a telltale sign of something really brilliant.
Yeah.
Like it's still so relevant.
They're forever human stories.
That's right.
Privileged oaks. Like when he comes in with the first line, I just like get chills every time.
Yeah.
Just like the trouble with it's just so like, obnoxious.
But it's great.
And I love the line like they're quite convinced they're right, because that's just such a good description of like everyone.
Yeah. Everyone
like
thinks they're right.
You have this firm ideology or viewpoint, and your perspective is right, and you're convinced. And then, they're privileged oaks, the victimized maples, and then at the end, I think they give this little twist that makes it less hard to know kind of which side they're on, because they say, basically it's like the end. They're forcing equality of the two with hammer, axe
and saw.
So they're cutting the oaks down in order for them to be equal.
Yeah. Oh yeah, like the social commentary can be applied to pretty much anything within that, and again, that's just the testament of such a great artistic piece that it is.
And it's like they're able to do it in such a short time period. The verses are so precise again, and there's no wasted line. It's like everything is necessary.
Yeah.
Like every note in the song is necessary. It just seems like from start to finish, it's like a perfected piece. Yeah. It's fun watching 20-minute videos, 25-minute videos. Like I don't mind.
I feel like this album, like it deserves this kind of attention.
Totally. Yeah, you can't not talk about the trees or any song really. It's like.
Yeah, you have to kind of delve in a little bit. But luckily, I'm going to try to pronounce it. I'm going to butcher it. La Villa Straganato? So close.
The old college try.
I know I got La Vella.
I think it's like Spanish, right?
Either way, I completely butchered it. But I don't know. I love this song. This is one of my favorites of Rush. I think this one might be my favorite instrumental piece from them. Because I feel like they know, like, the gold on this track. Like, each instrumental that most people do, there's, like, a moment of gold. And these guys don't let it waste, whereas I feel like other bands will just kind of, like, let you give you a glimmer of it and then move away. Whereas these guys will continuously remind you of the gold that they unearthed.
Yeah, well, they're really just going for it technically here. I mean, I think they deserve that at this point in the album because it's been so thematic, and it was time for them to just whip out the crazy instrumentals. But as crazy as some of the solos are, actually from just like a chord progression standpoint, the song it's actually a pretty basic chord progression, but they're always just hammering away, and like, Geddy's like constantly is known for all his runs up the fretboard and being in that kind of middle section of the bass. And then I think Pert is probably, for me, is the hero on the song. I just think
Oh, for sure.
the speed, the crazy pace of that cymbal, all the fills he's doing, some of those tom fills that are just classic him, where he's just going like on 8 toms at like
Yeah.
hyper speed, and yeah.
I can't help but gush about this song, especially once they get into that dun 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 dun. Like it's very jazzy and bluesy in that sense. Like it's bluesy in the fact that it's very simple, but it's jazzy in that they don't like just keep it simple.
Well, it's like big band jazz.
It is a big band jazz brought to life by 3 individuals.
Yeah, and this song, I mean, every riff is like, it was meant for Guitar Hero. It's just
Oh yeah, like this is one that I'd want to jump up onto my couch and just like air guitar away on it.
totally.
There are each moment where each band member is completely shining and like really bring about something beautiful. Like I love Giddy's bass fill, where it's just him and it's that.
Yeah, he always has those like couple measure solos.
Yeah.
That's like it's pretty classic Rush thing. You kind of like trade solo to solo, but Geddy's are all, to me, they're always just the most interesting.
Yeah, and I love how it all ends. Like this is the perfect ending song, because after here, like where else are you gonna go outside of like starting the album all over again?
The range, and I think there's a moment on here where I feel like post rock was born.
Oh yeah.
And it's that guitar tone around the 5 minute mark, I think, just about.
Oh, was that the one where they go?
I think you're thinking of a solo, and I'm thinking of just like. Okay. It's just sort of like this underlying.
Okay.
Arpeggio.
Right.
It's so cool.
Any lasting thoughts of the album overall?
Well, we didn't say much bad about it. I feel like it's pretty spotless.
It is one of those rare albums where like each moment is kind of perfect, and outside of maybe that one critique which I'll agree to within like the differentiations between the Apollo and the Dionysus area, it would have been nice to have like a clear cut definition. Like other than that, and that's not even really a knock against the album, it's more of just like the album structure.
Well, even structurally, I just think it's pretty perfect. You mentioned like not loving Circumstances, like to you that could have been, that's kind of your low point.
Yeah, but I also feel like it's needed as a nice bridge into the second half, because if they just like started off in a really bombastic and over the top way, I might have like felt like too much of a good thing.
My low point is La Via Strangiato.
Interesting. Okay.
I do really like it, but again, what I said about just kind of it being a basic chord progression, I know that's kind of like to me that's just a really important thing, and
oh no, for sure.
There's parts where they're just bum bum bum. It's going between those intervals for a long period of time, and I don't think it's quite as like, I don't know, intricate in that way, just songwriting wise, as some of the others.
Right.
But I do think it's, again, I think it's classic.
Yeah.
You know, it's the riffs and everything about it just stick with you.
Oh, for sure.
And you know, this album, I think it's a 35 minutes, 40 minutes.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure the review will probably be about the same length as it.
But they present, you know, in that amount of time, they present so many core human issues.
Yeah.
I feel like they have the human condition just like spot on nailed.
I'm ready to just give out my rating of this, which should be
go ahead.
pretty clear by now. Like Rush's Hemisphere is obviously an absolute masterpiece.
Yeah. I think it's a 10. I think it's a 10.
Yeah, that's pretty easy.
To me, it asserts Pert as kind of one of the greatest rock lyricists in my mind.
Yeah, and he really showed himself in this album, that's for sure.
Yeah. Any other thoughts?
I think that's about it. I can't think of anything else that I would want to add.
I will say, what's cool from like a visual art perspective is on the front where they have the two characters, they use it's like the painter Magritte, he paints
yeah, with
in
is it
suits
the apple?
and the hat, and they use that as like the sign of order.
Yeah.
That's just really cool to me because I love the apple painting. I have it in my office at work, and it's
amazing. Yeah, there's just so much to really dive into just within the album's artwork as well.
Totally.
There's too much to cover in one video for sure.
Man, yeah, this is giving you album length. So
Probably.
thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, no, thanks for coming on again, and I'll probably be on your channel for one of the other album reviews.
Totally.
Well, as always, thank you guys so much for watching, and thank you again, Matt, for coming on board. And until next time, Notes and Matt out.